My mother never wanted me. Until I inherited everything you know what's funny about family. We spend our whole lives thinking blood is supposed to mean something, that parents are programmed to love their children unconditionally. But what happens when your own mother looks at you like you're a mistake she can't undo? What happens when the day you were born became her biggest disappointment? I'm about to tell you a story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about unconditional love. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why some bridges are meant to burn. Stick around because the twist at the end is something nobody saw coming, not even me. My story doesn't start with abuse or neglect in the traditional sense. It starts with something quieter, something more insidious that slowly eats away at your soul. It starts with indifference. From my earliest memories, I knew something was off about the way my mother looked at me. There was this coldness in her eyes, this distance that I couldn't understand as a child. While other kids got hugs and kisses, I got nods and empty stares. My mom had wanted a daughter, you see, and instead she got me, a son. And apparently, that was an unforgivable crime in her eyes. I remember being maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting at the kitchen table coloring a picture. I'd spent hours on it, carefully staying inside the lines, picking colors I thought she'd love. I ran up to her with this picture, so proud, so desperate for even a smile. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, said, "That's nice," and went back to her magazine. No emotion, no warmth, nothing. I watched other moms at school pick up their kids with genuine excitement, their faces lighting up like their child was the best part of their day. My mom picked me up like she was collecting a package from the post office, just another errand to check off her list. The worst part wasn't what she did. It was what she didn't do. She never came to my school events, never asked about my day, never seemed interested in who I was becoming. I was a stranger living in her house, taking up space she clearly wished was occupied by someone else. I used to think maybe I was the problem, that if I just tried harder, got better grades, behaved perfectly, she might finally see me. Spoiler alert, nothing I did mattered. To her, I would always be the wrong child, the disappointment, the boy when she wanted a girl. Then my sister was born, and whatever small hope I had left completely shattered. I was 8 years old when she came into the world, and suddenly I understood what parental love actually looked like. The way my mom held my sister, the softness in her voice, the patience she had that I'd never experienced, it was like watching someone flip a switch. This was the mother I'd been waiting for my entire life, except she wasn't for me. She was for my sister, for the daughter she'd always wanted. And me? I became even more invisible than before. My sister got everything, and I mean everything. New clothes while I wore hand-me-downs from cousins, trips to the park while I stayed home alone, bedtime stories and lullabies that I'd only heard through the walls of my bedroom. My parents would take family photos and sometimes forget to call me into the frame. I'm not exaggerating. We have albums where it's just the 3 of them, like I didn't exist. My sister would cry, and both parents would rush to comfort her. I could be bleeding, and my mom would tell me to put a Band-Aid on it myself. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was a neon sign flashing, "You don't belong here." School became my escape, the one place where I wasn't defined by being the unwanted child. I threw myself into my studies, not because my parents encouraged it, but because it was something I could control. My grades were excellent. I joined clubs. I tried to build a life outside those 4 walls that felt like a prison. But even my achievements were met with indifference at home. I'd bring home an award, and my mom would glance at it, then immediately turn her attention to whatever my sister was doing. My dad? He just followed my mom's lead in everything, including how he treated me. My father wasn't cruel exactly, but he was complicit, which might actually be worse. He never stood up for me, never questioned why his son was treated like a burden, while his daughter was treated like a treasure. He occasionally slipped me some money, or give me a pat on the back when my mom wasn't looking, like these small gestures somehow made up for years of emotional neglect. They didn't. His silence was its own form of rejection, a daily reminder that keeping my mother happy was more important than protecting his own child. I learned early that I couldn't count on either of them. The breaking point came when I turned 18, the age when I was legally allowed to escape. I remember my birthday morning, no cake, no celebration, just my mom sitting me down at the kitchen table with this look of relief on her face. She told me it was time for me to start my own life, which was code for get out of our house. She'd already looked into apartments I could afford, had circled listings in the newspaper like she'd been planning this for months. My dad just sat there, nodding along, not even pretending to care that they were essentially kicking their son out the moment it became legal to do so. The cruelty wasn't just in asking me to leave. It was in how they'd left me completely unprepared for independence. They hadn't saved a single dollar for my education, hadn't taught me about bills or budgeting, hadn't done any of the things parents are supposed to do. But my sister, who was only 10 at the time, already had a college fund that they talked about openly at dinner. They'd been planning her future while actively trying to erase mine. I had exactly $300 in savings from odd jobs, no car, no clear path forward. But I had something they didn't expect. I had pride. I moved into the cheapest room I could find, basically a closet with a window in someone's basement. It smelled like mildew and the heating barely worked, but it was mine. I got a job at a grocery store, working nights after my classes at community college. I'd applied for every scholarship I could find, took out loans I'm still paying off today, and somehow managed to enroll in school. Those first few months were brutal. I was exhausted all the time, living off ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, wondering if I'd made a mistake trying to build something from nothing. But here's what my parents never understood. When you've been unwanted your whole life, you develop this fierce independence, this determination to prove that you matter, even if your own family thinks you don't. Every A on a test was a middle finger to my mother's indifference. Every paycheck was proof that I could survive without them. I made friends at school, real friends who chose to be in my life, who actually cared about me. I built a support system from scratch, and slowly, painfully, I started to realize that maybe the problem was never me. My parents never called, never checked if I was alive or dead. Holidays came and went without even a text message. I'd see Facebook posts of their family trips, the three of them smiling at beaches and theme parks, and it didn't even hurt anymore. I was numb to it. My sister, to her credit, wasn't a bad kid. She'd been conditioned by our parents, just like I had, just in a different way. She'd message me sometimes, little questions about homework or life, and I'd always respond, because none of this was her fault. But the distance between us was massive. We were strangers who happened to share DNA. Then one day, out of the blue, I got a call from my grandmother, my dad's mother. We'd met a few times when I was younger, but they lived several states away, and visits were rare. Her voice was shaky on the phone, and she asked me a question that changed everything. "Is it true that your parents asked you to leave?" She sounded heartbroken, confused, like she couldn't believe her own son would do such a thing. I told her the truth, all of it, the years of being treated like I didn't exist, the favoritism, being kicked out at 18. There was silence on the other end, and I heard her crying. Apparently, my parents had been lying to my grandparents for years, telling them I was independent and chose to live on my own, painting themselves as supportive parents of an ambitious son. My grandparents had been sending them money occasionally, thinking it was being used to help me with school. Spoiler alert, I never saw a cent of that money. My grandmother was horrified, absolutely devastated. She talked to my grandfather, and within a week, they called me again with an offer that felt like something out of a movie. They wanted me to move in with them, finish school without working myself to death, and be part of a real family. I was skeptical at first, because trusting family hadn't exactly worked out for me before. But my grandparents were different. They were genuinely warm, genuinely interested in my life. My grandmother cried when she saw how thin I'd gotten from skipping meals to save money. My grandfather, a retired engineer, immediately started helping me with my coursework, investing time in me that my own father never had. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered to someone. They didn't just offer me a room. They offered me belonging, something I'd been searching for my entire life. Living with my grandparents was like entering an alternate universe where family actually meant something. They came to my college events, celebrated my successes, comforted me during failures. They treated me like I was valuable, like my presence brought them joy instead of burden. My grandmother would cook my favorite meals. My grandfather would tell me stories about the family history I'd never been told. They showed me photos of my dad as a kid, and I could see the exact moment he changed when he met my mother. My grandmother would get quiet looking at those photos, like she'd lost her son to someone who didn't deserve him. Then came the conversation that would eventually cause all hell to break loose. One evening, my grandparents sat me down in their living room with serious expressions. My grandfather cleared his throat and told me they'd been thinking about their will, about their estate, and what would happen to it after they were gone. They owned their house outright, had substantial savings, and some valuable property. They told me they were leaving everything to me, that I was the grandchild who needed it, who deserved it, who would actually appreciate the life they built. I was stunned, overwhelmed, completely unprepared for this level of generosity. I tried to argue that my sister should get something too, but my grandfather shook his head firmly. "Your sister will be taken care of by your parents," he said. "You've been left to fend for yourself, and that ends now." My grandmother added that they'd seen enough, knew enough about how I'd been treated, and this was their way of making it right. They made me promise to finish school, to build a good life, to never let my parents make me feel worthless again. I promised through tears I couldn't control. Of course, secrets like this don't stay buried forever, especially in families. Somehow, my parents found out about the inheritance, probably through a relative my grandparents told in confidence. The phone that had been silent for years suddenly wouldn't stop ringing. Text messages poured in, voicemails stacked up, all from my parents who suddenly remembered I existed. The messages started off sweet, asking how I was doing, saying they missed me, the kind of manipulation that might have worked on the kid I used to be. But I'd grown up, hardened by neglect, and I could see right through it. When I didn't respond to the nice messages, they changed tactics. My mother called me ungrateful, said after everything they'd done for me, this was how I repaid them. Everything they'd done for me, they kicked me out with nothing. My dad sent messages about family obligations, about how inheritance should be shared equally, about duty and respect. The irony was suffocating. They wanted to lecture me about family while having treated me like a stranger for 18 years. My sister even got involved, though her messages were more confused than angry, not really understanding why everyone was suddenly fighting. The real showdown happened when they decided to show up at my grandparents' house unannounced. I was studying in the living room when the doorbell rang, and there they were, my entire nuclear family on the porch. My mother's face had that fake sweetness plastered on, the one she used when she wanted something. My dad looked uncomfortable. My sister just looked confused. My grandparents stood firm, my grandfather physically blocking the doorway, telling them they weren't welcome after what they'd done. The conversation that followed was the culmination of years of suppressed anger and hurt. My mother actually had the audacity to cry, to play the victim, saying she couldn't believe her own parents were turning against her. My grandmother, who I'd only ever seen as gentle and kind, absolutely unleashed on her. "You treated your son like garbage," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You kicked him out with nothing. You lied to us for years, and now you want his inheritance? You should be ashamed. My dad tried to defend my mom, saying I was being selfish for accepting everything that family should share. My grandfather laughed bitterly and asked where that philosophy was when I was sleeping in a basement and eating one meal a day. I finally spoke up, and my voice was calmer than I expected. I told them I didn't owe them anything. Not my forgiveness, not my inheritance, not even my time. I told them they made their choice when they treated me like a burden instead of a son, when they celebrated one child while erasing the other, when they kicked me out the moment it was legal. My mother called me selfish, spitting the word like poison. And you know what? I agreed with her. I told her, yes, I was being selfish. And I'd learned it from the best, from parents who put their own wants above their child's needs for 18 years. My dad tried a different approach, appealing to logic, saying that legally they might have a case to contest the will. My grandfather, the retired engineer who dealt with contracts his whole life, smiled and told him to try it. The will was ironclad, witnessed, notarized, and clearly stated. Plus, contesting it would mean admitting in court exactly how they treated me, dragging all their dirty laundry into the public record. My dad's face fell, realizing they had no legal ground to stand on. They'd come expecting manipulation to work, expecting me to cave like I might have as a desperate kid. But I wasn't that kid anymore. They left angry, my mother shouting about how I'd regret this, how family was everything, how I was making the biggest mistake of my life. My sister looked back at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, maybe the first glimmer of understanding that the family narrative she'd been fed wasn't the whole truth. After they drove away, I sat on the couch and just breathed, feeling lighter than I had in years. My grandmother hugged me tight and told me she was proud of me. My grandfather squeezed my shoulder and said, "That's my grandson." For the first time, I felt like I actually had parents, just not the biological ones. The aftermath was predictable. My parents tried to turn other relatives against me, painting me as the ungrateful son who stole from his own family. Some bought it, some didn't, and honestly, I stopped caring. The relatives who reached out to hear my side of the story got it. The ones who judged without asking weren't people I needed in my life anyway. I blocked my parents' numbers, locked them on all social media, and cut off every avenue they had to reach me. My sister and I still talk occasionally, and I think she's slowly realizing the truth about how things really were. I finished college with honors, got into a great graduate program, and I'm building the life my grandparents believed I could have. The inheritance, which my parents were so desperate to get their hands on, is sitting in investments and savings, a safety net I never had growing up. I think about using some of it to start a foundation for kids aging out of foster care or dealing with family rejection, turning my pain into something that helps others. My grandparents are still around, still the most important people in my life, still showing me every day what real love looks like. People ask me if I feel guilty, if I regret cutting off my parents, if I think I'm being too harsh. The answer is no, not even a little bit. Guilt is what they want me to feel. It's the tool they used to control me for years. But here's what I've learned. You don't owe loyalty to people just because you share DNA. You don't owe forgiveness to people who aren't sorry. You don't owe anything to people who treated your existence like an inconvenience. Family is supposed to be a source of love and support, and when it's not, you're allowed to walk away. My mother wanted a daughter and got a son, and she spent 18 years punishing me for it. She created her own consequences, and now she gets to live with them. The irony is that if they just treated me like a human being, like a son worth loving, we might have had a relationship. I might have shared willingly, might have wanted them in my life. But they gambled on me staying broken and desperate forever, and they lost. Sometimes the biggest revenge isn't doing something cruel back. It's simply thriving without them, building a life so good that their absence doesn't even register as a loss. So here I am, The unwanted son who became the favored grandson, the burden who became the heir, the mistake who became the success story. My life isn't perfect. I still have moments where I grieve the parents I should have had, the childhood I deserved. But I'm surrounded by people who chose me, who see value in me, who treat me like I matter. And that's worth more than any inheritance, more than any amount of money. The best revenge is living well, and trust me, I'm living incredibly well. To anyone out there dealing with family rejection, with parents who make you feel worthless, with favoritism that cuts like a knife, I want you to hear this. It's not your fault. You are not the problem, and you deserve better. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep people warm who wouldn't even notice if you froze. Build your own family, find your own people, and never let anyone make you feel like you're less than enough. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Chosen family is real family. And sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. My story isn't over. I'm still young, still building, still growing. But I know one thing for certain. I will never let my parents back into my life, not for guilt, not for money, not for some fake reconciliation where they pretend the past didn't happen. They made their choices, and I've made mine. And you know what? I sleep better at night than I ever have before, knowing that I am finally free from people who only wanted me when I had something they could take. That's not love. That's exploitation, and I'm done being exploited. If my parents are watching this somehow, I want them to understand something. You didn't lose me when my grandparents changed their will. You lost me every single day you chose my sister over me, every birthday you forgot, every achievement you ignored, every moment you made me feel invisible. The inheritance is just the final chapter of a story you wrote yourselves. You wanted me gone, and now I am completely and permanently. Congratulations, you finally got what you wanted. You just didn't expect it to come with consequences.